keep in mind that, of course, the purpose of the group activity was to prepare for the assignment. There might be there quotes that you found relevant and interesting enough that you want to reuse, but the assignment should be another level of development, right? Meaning, if you got an A on those notes, it doesn't mean that you copy those notes in your assignments, you get an A. The assignment requires a full analysis. Make sure, for the purpose of the assignment, which is due Friday of next week, October 3rd, that you make passages or situations, scenes from the book, The Master of the World, the focus, the central focal point of your assignment, to then develop a low-level analysis of those passages, showing how you read the themes of fascination and fear of technology into those passages. Okay. Today we're going to start with a review of common themes that we found in now, by the end of today, 3 films that follow the same pattern, where one or more of the protagonists get in touch with, interact with a sentient technology and develop a relationship that is mutual and go through a transformation which is also reciprocal. The technology changes the human, and the human helps the technology transform or develop its potential in some kind of fashion. However, before, and then we'll watch our first group of scenes from today's film, which is Christine from 1983. Before that part of the class, I want to speak briefly about this nice novel by a British writer that was published in 1905. Maybe some copies of the book came out at the end of 1904. So we're exactly around the same time when Jules Verne published its Master of the World. And here too, there are many similarities. This is a representation of a crude representation of the car, the black car in the title. In fact, my impression is that this car in the illustration is too small. But you can see, for example, the spectral face of the driver, this idea of the darkness in which this evil engineer operates with his very fast car, a fast car that is used to steal, to do robberies all over England, and also you get the sense that in English society is precipitating into chaos because of the fears generated by this evil engineer driving this very fast car, appearing out of nowhere in multiple places, disappearing very quickly, kidnapping people. The author's full name was John Burland, Harris Burland. He was born in 1870, and this was one of his first books. He had had a bestseller a couple of years earlier with this book called The Cobra, about magic, about the mysterious areas and traditions of the Middle East. You see in this slide the crucial elements in the plot. The protagonist starts as a simple bank manager, and as usual, as it is easy to find in the literature of this time, there are many moralistic elements in the construction of the characters. In this case, the good and honest citizen, Jack Porteous, encounters a woman who's defined in the book literally as a temptress. This woman is just trying to steal money from the bank. She makes him believe that she's in love with him. They make plans to leave England and to go to South America with the money he will take from the bank. And in fact, she disappears with the money. He is charged with robbery, sent to prison for many years. On top of this, his wife dies of a broken heart when she finds out that her husband has a lover. And so he goes to prison, struck by the loss of the woman he believed was the love of his life, Marie, and also the sense of guilt, the feeling of guilt towards his wife. He will come back later on, and we know from the premise that he had a predisposition for mechanical engineer. He comes back. It's like the Count of Monte Cristo. After he is released from prison, he comes back into British society under a different name, William Jordison. And of course, it's only later in the novel that we understand that these two characters are the same. And now it's not just a mechanical engineer or somebody who was an amateur mechanical engineer, but is a full-fledged inventor, that he has somebody who's created this black motor car. It's enormous. You'll see the specs in the next slide. Faster than any car, including sports car from that period. Silent, stealthy, meaning that it's the perfect device that one would use for robberies and other crimes, especially under the cover of darkness. And here you find the description of the car that makes it both powerful and menacing, right? In many of the books from this time, there is this sense that these new technologies, such as the automobile and a little later planes were already existing, but they will arrive into literature a little later, represent a risk or even a threat. You can see how big the car is. It had a 9-foot wheelbase, was 18 feet in length. It's defined as a huge unwieldy monster, a nerve mass of metal. The reference to biology is common in the literature of the time, but the idea is that the combination of the driver plus the machine is almost like a hybrid creature, a chimera, whereby the machine becomes an extension of the nervous system of the driver, and the driver becomes an extension of the mechanical engineering of the car. They serve each other's purposes. And you can read everything, of course. It's black, and it's defined as a cross between a hearse and a locomotive because it's so big. And also, being so big, whenever there are descriptions of the car on the road being driven, or there are car chases, there is a beautiful long car chase at the end, the car is really not maneuvered as swiftly and nimbly as a modern car. It's really almost like a locomotive or a ship, meaning the kind of device where you need to plan where to go. You need to know when you start to brake. You need to know when to start a turn, because the machine is so big, not just fast. It's almost the perfect car, but what makes it perfect is the speed, right? And therefore, the speed gives it the ability to be everywhere almost at the same time, right? It might one day be in Yorkshire, the next in Devon, and the next in Inverness, meaning the entire country is under the threat of this criminal and his accomplices, because the inventor also has a small crew. In here too, you find common top tropes found in Jules Verne and other places. The inventor is clearly, when he comes back as William Jordison, turned into a madman. The original honest bank manager, once his moral fiber was impacted negatively by this manipulation by this woman, right? he has crossed to the side of evil. He lives in a remote hiding place. His apparitions are mysterious. Of course, in the novel, there are characters on the side of good and characters on the side of evil. There is a kidnapping. The technology is disrupting to regular society, not just because there are robberies, but also road traffic is being disrupted. And there is a sense of anxiety, of growing anxiety in society that impacts the ability of good, outstanding citizens to be working productively. Darkness is when the inventor operates for his robberies, kidnappings, etc. And at the end, as usual, the rejection of the technology happens symbolically through a process of distraction that happens after a car chase that I defined as epic because it goes on and on through the night. And the basic moral message is still that humanity is not ready for these advanced technologies, not because they lack the skills or the knowledge to handle them, but because they lack the mindset, the moral values, the moral fiber to handle the power that is associated with these machines. So the plot and the contents are interesting, but again, we're not going to read from this. I just wanted you to know something about it because it's so closely aligned with some of the literature that we're reading, including Jules Verne. Of course, under week 5, you find different links. You can see, if you want to, the entire film that we're watching today on Amazon Prime. Of course, we'll watch some of the film today, some next week, or you can check on justwatch.com and see what other streaming platforms have this film. If you're close to a local library, chances are that a local library will have a DVD, if you have a DVD player, of this film. And there is also a module, as usual, devoted to the film with some content, some notes, and other links. This is that module. You see here part of a frame when Arnie finds Christine, which at that point is practically a wreck, but he decides to buy it for $250 anyway. And this is the section that I'm using for today's presentation, Christine compared to Bumblebee and the Love Bug, because as I said, there are tons of similarities among these three films, starting from the fact that at the beginning of the film, there is a choice, that it's not a chance encounter between the user and the technology that founds the relationship between them. They choose each other based on their profile, based on their behaviors. So, for example, you'll see how Arnie is simply driving by a house that looks almost abandoned, with a garden that is overgrown with plants, and in the middle of this garden there is this wreck of a car from 1957, this Plymouth Fury, and Arnie tells his friend who's driving to stop the car, and he runs to the car. He's enthusiastic about his discovery, and this is not where the film begins, but it's actually where the book begins. The film is based on a novel by Stephen King, and that's what you find after the prologue in chapter 1, this discovery. So, as we've seen in Bumblebee, Arnie sees value in what to everyone else's eyes appear to be a wreck, a dusty old car that needs a lot of repairs. And actually, in the book, not in the film, we learn that Arnie is not popular at school, is not good at sports, is not even good at school in general. He's smart, but is not a particularly good student. But there is one thing that he's good at, and that is working on cars, mechanical skills. Okay, and Christine, that in the film is inhabited by some kind of demonic spirit, will not reveal itself to Arnie right away. Arnie will be tested, and only when Christine recognizes that Arnie is worthy of her consideration, then a connection will be established. Because in fact, as we will see next week, Christine would be able, with its own supernatural powers, to restore itself. She doesn't need someone to work on her. And Arnie working on her restoration is the test of his love and commitment that Christine requires to establish this bond. And of course, then this bond is diabolical. And by the end of the film, Arnie will be the minion of Christine, will just be the instrument of Christine's evil plans. We've seen just in the past 2 weeks the developing relationship between Charlie and Bumblebee based on their experience of a loss. Charlie lost her father, Bumblebee lost his planet, and is separated from his friends, the other Autobots, Optimus Prime, and the other members of his clan. And there are other elements that create the foundation for this reciprocal choice, for the establishing of this friendship. And Jim and Herbie, we've seen how in the beginning, Jim steps to defend Herbie in the agency, in the dealership of Thorndike, when Thorndike is verbally and physically abused to the little car Herbie and Jim is trying to defend, and that's where they bond on those values. In all of these films, the vehicle has some kind of notion of justice, and that's also very important. So we see how Herbie is in contrast with Thorndike. Thorndike in the comedy, the love bag, represents evil, right? Represents greed, represents manipulation. And clearly there is an opposition established whereby Herbie is on the side of everything good in society and social practices. Bumblebee also comes from a situation where an injustice was suffered because the Decepticons are the evil bots that want to destroy the Autobots. And Christine also has an idea of good and evil. The car, as we will see next week, will try to eliminate bullies that have bullied Arnie. And Arnie himself comes from a situation at school where he's being bullied and suffering injustice, and is also mistreated initially by his parents. Then he will be the one mistreated his parents. The bond between the machine and the human is always based on empathy, right? We just mentioned the episode in the car, how Jim feels about the little car being mistreated, and she, or it, Herbie, he recognizes that. Charlie and B-127 tell each other stories about their past life, right? Where they come from and where their project of a future got interrupted or became too difficult to accomplish by themselves. And in the case of Arnie, you will see how Arnie wants the car at all costs. In fact, he ends up paying more than he should, works tirelessly to restore the car, and this is what creates the basis for the relationship with the car. Of course, I mentioned the theme of temptation because when you'll see the scene in which Arnie decides that he wants to buy the car, his decision is not rational. His decision is impulsive, emotional, completely. So there is something about the car that is tempting him to get into that experience. And in fact, that experience will change him, first making him a cool guy and then turning him into a criminal. As usual, as we've seen in Vern, there are in Christine plenty of ominous signs of what the car is, right? Negative premonitions. Arnie will change, So at the beginning of the movie, you'll see Arnie as a loser in school, in his family, in life, someone who's not particularly strong physically, somebody who's awkward when he moves, clumsy, uh, somebody with glasses, and then little by little, he'll become a cool guy with the best girl in school. He will not need glasses anymore. His air will change, his demeanor will change, and really, a lot of the movie's success is based on Keith Stanton's interpretation, and the actor, was then hired to make a lot of movies where he was playing the part of the nerd. He was typecast as a school nerd. The film was fairly successful. The budget for the film was about 10 millions. The movie grossed 21 millions, less than expected, but became a cult classic and was very successful through the years. And in fact, we'll see that there are rumors of a remake. Okay. The fact that Arnie becomes enslaved by the machine is reminiscent of this idea of the abduction or seduction of the car, right? And of course, the film ends with the destruction of the car, but we're not completely sure that the destruction is permanent. And even more so in the book. In the book, the surviving characters, a few months after the destruction of Christine, hear of a weird accident in California, and the thought crosses their minds that this might be Christine that has reconstructed itself, found another owner, driver, and is still operating and doing evil things. Jealousy is another small way to build the idea of a relationship between the user and the car. So Christine is very jealous of Dennis, who's Arnie's best friend, even more jealous of Arnie's girlfriend Lee, who will almost die in the car. Herbie is jealous when Jim brings home this flashy red Lamborghini and tries to destroy the red Italian sports car. And we've seen how Bumblebee destroys the kitchen because, like a pet, when he's abandoned at home by Charlie, left alone, then he acts up as his emotional reaction to that. In all of this film, there is a sense of an apocalyptic change, meaning that by the end of the film, we get the sense that humanity will go through an evolutionary step, whereby the ecosystem of humans will be inhabited by more and more sentient technologies, right? And we are facing that with AI, things like AI companions, etc. So there is a supernatural reality that comes to life, becomes evident, and that is not the possibility of this supernatural reality interfering, crossing paths with historic reality is never taken out by the end of the film, right? Keep in mind the nice little scene, and there's a transcript of that dialogue in the wiki of the class, when Tennessee, Jim Douglas's mechanically endowed friend and artist, has this speech about machines, saying the more time we spend with machines and the more we transfer our emotions onto those machines, and therefore some of those machines are able to absorb our vitality. And this is very true of Christine. In fact, the biggest difference between the book by Stephen King and the film is that in the book, in the film, Christine, will see at the beginning of the film, comes out of the factory as some kind of diabolic creature. Already when it's about to leave the assembly line, Christine will injure one of the workers, kill another worker, and those things will happen out of its own sense of justice. Those will be punishments for lack of respect. In the book, Christine is not in the book by Stephen King, Christine is not a diabolical creature made of metal. Rather, there is the suggestion that since Christine was owned for a long time by a man who was evil, Roland Lebey, that Christine absorbed the evil impulses of this man who was abusive to his wife, to his daughter, both of which perished in the car. And that through the constant interaction with an evil user, this car acquired a spiritual dark side. Okay, very interesting, and in some ways connected to what's going on in a comedic way with Herbie the Love Bug. And we know that in Bumblebee, the conclusion will tell you that humans and Autobots will have to live together in the future and work together. In order to understand the transformation of Arnie into a cool guy, you have to keep in mind this notion of the greaser subculture that emerged in the post-war America. Initially, greaser was a derogatory term given to Italians, to Mexicans, to other immigrants. It's not clear what the origin is, but it expanded into American society and into the media. Of course, the film with John Travolta is the best and most famous example. This is based on a musical from the 1970s. The movie came out in 1978, which is the year when the film takes place. Christine was produced in 1983. But even before this time, and this is John Travolta, I want you to have a look because Arnie is mimicking this kind of character. But even before that, James Dean, who died in 1955 in a car accident on a Porsche 550, a race car, he was driving to a racetrack and at an intersection was hit by another driver. Even this actor, very popular actor, received 2 posthumous nominations after he died. He was nominated twice for an Oscar for movies he had already appeared in. He was the incarnation of this model of the greaser, of the cool guy with a dark leather jacket, with hairstyle, with the help of gel, right? And with a certain kind of surly face, right? In all of these movies, an essential part is that whenever the main character is working on the car, this is the external visualization of the character working on their personal transformation. So they're working on themselves. This is true of Arnie, as we will see. The more he works on the car, the more he becomes stronger and cooler. This is true of Charlie, and this is true not only of Jim, but the other people around the car, Tennessee and Carol as well. In all of these films, the radio in the car is being used as the voice of the machine, right? Christine will use the radio to communicate its emotions, also to threat people. Charlie gives Bumblebee a voice by installing a new radio. In the case of Jim and Herbie, Herbie doesn't speak through the radio, but uses the honk, honking the horn to communicate some rudimentary reactions. Another thing that is common here to all these films is that there is either a garage or a junkyard that is the only, from the beginning, the only safe space for the character. School, family are not good places for these characters, but the junkyard is, paradoxically, right? Arnie will take the car. Arnie's parents will tell Arnie, we don't want this piece of junk in our driveway. So he will take it to this junkyard where, and this was common in post-war America, you could find a garage that will rent you a place for a car you were working on. So you would pay to have the car in the facility, to have access to the tools in the facility. In the book, there is something more that we don't fully see in the film, that is to say that this junkyard / garage where the car is taken by Arnie is also a place for crime, right? A place where criminals get together. Charlie is much happier in the junkyard of Uncle Hank than she is at home or school. And in the case of Herbie, the house of Jim and Tennessee is like a garage, right? Their house, which is inside of an abandoned fire station. About the remake, uh, it was in the press, has been in the press since 2021, and in fact, they announced a release in 2024. Of course, it never happened, and now this is from June, from a blog on cinema saying this remake will not happen. And I think it will not happen with the original director. They also had a cast, but it might happen with a different director. Sony is involved. I think they'll make it into a modern version instead of a remake with some modern car in lieu of this 1958 Plymouth Fury. Okay, and now we can watch the film